Welcome to another chilling tale of the unknown. Tonight, we venture deep into the heart of Illinois, to a place shrouded in darkness and steeped in tragedy. A place where the echoes of the past refuse to fade. This is the story of Ashmore Estates, one of the most haunted locations in the state. If you dare to listen, prepare yourself for a journey into the supernatural. The birth of a nightmare. The house had been abandoned for years, standing alone on the outskirts of town like a forgotten relic. Its windows were dark, its doors swollen shut with age. No one knew exactly why it had been left to rot, but the stories whispered among the townsfolk painted a chilling picture. Some said it was cursed, others believed something unnatural lurked inside. No one dared enter, until tonight. Caleb, Jenna, and Marcus stood before the looming structure, their breath visible in the crisp autumn air. The full moon cast an eerie glow upon the peeling paint and ivy-choked walls. Caleb, ever the daredevil, smirked as he pushed open the rusted gate. "Come on, guys," he said. "Let's make history." Jenna hesitated, rubbing her arms as a shiver passed through her. "Maybe we should just—" Marcus interrupted, rolling his eyes. "We've come this far. Let's just take a look and get out." The trio stepped forward, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The front door, surprisingly, groaned open with little resistance. Inside, dust motes danced in the beams of their lights, revealing furniture shrouded in white sheets. The air smelled of decay and something else, something metallic. They ventured further, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Faint whispers seemed to rise from the walls, but they dismissed it as the wind sneaking through unseen cracks. As they moved deeper, they found themselves drawn to a grand fireplace. Above it hung a large, ornate mirror, its glass murky and speckled with age. Jenna gasped. "Look!" The mirror's surface rippled as though disturbed by an unseen force. A shadow flickered within its depths. Caleb, emboldened by adrenaline, reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the glass, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing their lights. Panic set in. They scrambled to relight their flashlights, but the batteries were dead. The darkness pressed in, suffocating and absolute. A low, guttural sound filled the air, a growl that did not belong to anything human. Then the whispers became voices. "You have woken me." A sickening chill crawled up Jenna's spine. The voice had come from the mirror. She turned, heart pounding, as the glass shifted again, revealing a figure, a tall, gaunt thing with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. Its limbs jerked unnaturally as it moved toward them, its fingers elongating into razor-sharp claws. Caleb grabbed Jenna's wrist. "Run!" They bolted, their breaths ragged as they stumbled through the darkness. Marcus yelped as something snagged his ankle, dragging him backward. Jenna screamed, reaching for him, but the creature was faster. It pulled him into the mirror, his shrieks swallowed by the glass as if he had never been there. The house trembled. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. Shadows spilled from the mirror like ink, slithering toward them. Caleb yanked Jenna up the staircase, their only thought to escape. But as they reached the upper landing, they froze. The hall stretched impossibly long, its doors multiplying, shifting, trapping them in a maze of the unknown. The whispers returned, a cacophony of voices from different times, different ages. They spoke of suffering, of endless torment. The house was not just abandoned, it was alive, feeding on those who entered, twisting their souls into its walls. Jenna sobbed. "We're never getting out." Caleb clenched his fists. "We have to." A door at the end of the hall creaked open. A child stood there, her eyes vacant, her skin ashen. She lifted a hand, pointing back the way they had come. A chance. A warning. Gripping Jenna's hand, Caleb sprinted back down the hall, following the child's guidance. The house roared in defiance, its walls bending inward, trying to trap them. They reached the stairs just as the shadows lunged. Jenna tripped. Caleb caught her, dragging her through the front door as it slammed shut behind them. They tumbled onto the porch, gasping for breath. The house stood silent, as if nothing had happened. Marcus was gone. The mirror was gone, and somewhere within, the whispers laughed. The nightmare had been reborn. The spirits that remain. Elliot Parker had always been fascinated by abandoned places. There was something about peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and the ghosts of memories left behind that thrilled him. So when he heard about the Holloway Manor, a decrepit mansion deep in the woods, he knew he had to see it for himself. Legends swirled around the estate, each more terrifying than the last. Some said the original owner, Harold Holloway, had gone mad and slaughtered his family. Others claimed the house was built on cursed land where spirits never truly left. Locals whispered that on certain nights, lights flickered through the cracked windows, and screams echoed through the trees. Elliot, a firm skeptic, dismissed it all as ghost stories meant to keep thrill-seekers away. One autumn evening, he grabbed his camera, a flashlight, and a voice recorder before making the long trek to the mansion. The house loomed in the twilight, its silhouette jagged against the sky, its windows like vacant eyes. The front door was slightly ajar, as if inviting him in. He stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and decay. His footsteps echoed as he moved through the grand foyer, where a massive chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling. Framed portraits lined the walls, their subjects staring with hollow, painted eyes. The scent of something rotten lingered in the air. Elliot took out his voice recorder. "Entering Holloway Manor," he murmured. "The house is in extreme disrepair. Feels uneasy, but no sign of spirits yet." He ventured deeper. The parlor was filled with tattered furniture, a grand piano with keys yellowed by time. A faint whispering sound drifted through the room, but when he turned to locate the source, there was nothing. The kitchen was worse. Rusted knives lay scattered across the counter, and deep gouges marred the wooden walls. The sink was full of something dark, thick, and unmoving. His breath hitched. "Maybe an animal got in here," he rationalized, though his own voice wavered. Then, something moved in the corner of his vision. He turned sharply. A shadow darted down the hall. Elliot's pulse quickened, but he wasn't about to leave without proof. He followed, his flashlight trembling slightly. He entered what must have been a child's bedroom. A rocking horse stood in the center, swaying gently though there was no breeze. The bed was still made, as if waiting for an occupant that would never return. Then he heard it. A soft giggle. His breath came in short bursts. He swept the flashlight across the room. "Is someone here?" he called out. Silence. Elliot pressed record again. "I just heard laughter. Sounded like a child. No explanation yet. Checking upstairs." The staircase groaned beneath his weight. At the top, a long hallway stretched into darkness. The doors along the corridor were slightly open, as if waiting for him to look inside. He picked the closest one. Inside was a study. The fireplace was lined with old books, some stacked haphazardly on the floor. A massive oak desk sat in the center, a single candle resting atop it. Elliot approached, his fingers brushing the desk surface. It was coated in dust, except for a single, fresh handprint. He swallowed hard. The whispering returned, growing louder. The air in the room turned ice cold. His breath came out in misty puffs. The candle flickered to life on its own. Elliot backed away, panic creeping into his chest. Okay, I'm going," he muttered. Then the door slammed shut behind him. His flashlight flickered. A shadow moved in the corner. Then another. Figures began to emerge from the walls, their faces twisted and pale, their mouths stretched in silent screams. They reached for him with long, claw-like fingers. Elliot fumbled with the door handle, yanking it desperately. It wouldn't budge. The whispers became words. "You shouldn't have come." A cold hand gripped his shoulder. He screamed. The room tilted, his vision blurring. He stumbled backward, falling hard against the desk. The candle extinguished. The whispering stopped, and then silence. The door creaked open on its own. Shaking, Elliot scrambled to his feet and bolted from the room, down the stairs, and through the front door. The house seemed to exhale as he left, the whispers fading into the night. He didn't stop running until he reached his car. He fumbled with the keys, his hands trembling as he started the engine. His camera was still on, still recording. When he played it back later, the audio sent ice through his veins. Among his frantic breaths, just before he fled the house, a child's voice whispered into the microphone. "You'll be back." Elliot never did return to Holloway Manor. But at night, he sometimes awoke to soft giggles in the darkness of his room. And no matter how many times he moved, they always followed. Because some spirits remain. The ultimate test of fear. Fear is the oldest and most primal of all emotions. It lingers in the dark corners of our minds, whispering doubts, urging hesitation. Some say fear is a weakness. Others say it is the key to survival. But what if fear itself was the test? It all began with an invitation. A blood-red envelope arrived at the doorstep of 5 individuals, each from different walks of life. Inside, a single black card bore the words, "You have been chosen to face the ultimate test of fear. Survive the night, and you will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. Fail, and you become part of the house." No sender, no instructions, just a date and time. Curiosity is a powerful thing, even stronger than self-preservation. And so, despite the uncertainty, they all arrived at the designated location, a towering, decrepit mansion on the edge of an uncharted forest. The air was thick with decay, and the massive iron gates creaked open on their own, as if welcoming them into their fate. Inside, the mansion was eerily pristine, its Gothic chandeliers casting flickering shadows along the long corridors. At the center of the grand hall stood a figure clad in a plague doctor's mask and a crimson velvet coat. His voice, cold and measured, carried an unnatural weight. "You are here because you claim to know fear," he said. "But fear is not merely a ghostly whisper in the dark. Fear is suffocating, maddening, and absolute. Tonight you will learn its true face." Before anyone could react, the doors slammed shut. The first test, the fear of being watched. The lights dimmed until only the candle sconces along the walls remained. The 5 contestants exchanged wary glances. There was Alan, a skeptic journalist. Mara, an adrenaline junkie. Louis, a former soldier. Emily, a horror writer. And Victor, a scientist who believed fear was nothing more than a chemical reaction. The masked figure's voice boomed through unseen speakers. "Your first test begins now. You are not alone in this house. Something watches you from the dark corners. If you turn your back on it, it will move closer." The rules were simple. They had to keep moving through the mansion without ever turning away from the feeling of unseen eyes. They ventured down dimly lit halls, their steps hesitant. Every time they blinked or turned too quickly, shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, growing closer. Victor scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "This is just psychological suggestion." But then, Alan turned a corner too quickly, and a piercing shriek filled the hall. The group turned back to find Alan's body, his face twisted in sheer terror, his eyes wide but lifeless. His shadow, however, remained. It slithered along the walls, now a separate entity, whispering in a guttural voice. Point 1 down. The second test, the fear of the unseen. Shaken but determined, the remaining 4 pressed on. They entered a grand dining room where a long table was set with a grotesque feast, meats of unrecognizable origin, blood-red wine, and rotting fruit. The masked host's voice returned. "To proceed, you must eat. But beware, some dishes do not wish to be consumed." Louis, ever the pragmatic one, took a piece of meat and chewed it without hesitation. Mara followed, grimacing. But when Emily lifted a forkful of what appeared to be soup, it began to move. A human eye surfaced, staring directly at her. The bowl trembled, and suddenly, tendrils shot out, wrapping around Emily's wrist. She screamed as the thing dragged her face first into the dish. Her body collapsed onto the floor, but her screams continued to echo from inside the bowl, growing distant, as if she were falling endlessly into an abyss. Another one gone. The third test, the fear of what you cannot escape. The survivors, Louis, Mara, and Victor, were led to a grand bedroom. The bed was massive, draped in deep red sheets. The walls were covered in mirrors, each reflecting something slightly off. "In this room," the voice announced, "your reflection is not your own. If it moves without you, do not let it out of your sight." Mara was the first to notice. In the far mirror, her reflection smirked, even though she was frozen in fear. Then it stepped forward, out of the mirror. Her own doppelganger lunged at her, grasping her throat with an unholy strength. Victor and Louis tried to intervene, but their own reflections flickered, twisting into grotesque mockeries of themselves. Mara's copy grinned wider as she whispered, "I'm you now." And then Mara was gone. Her reflection stood in her place, but her eyes were empty. The final test, the fear of truth. Louis and Victor stumbled into the final chamber, a vast, darkened hall with a single spotlight illuminating a tall, antique chair. The masked figure stood beside it. "This is the final test," he said. "To leave, you must take a seat and accept the truth of your fear." Victor hesitated. "This is all a trick. Fear is an illusion." Louis, exhausted, walked toward the chair. "I don't care anymore. I just want this to be over." The moment he sat, the light intensified. Images flooded his mind, his worst regrets, his failures, the lives he took in war. His screams echoed through the mansion as his body crumbled into dust. Victor turned to run, but the walls melted away, revealing an infinite void. He was no longer in the mansion but floating in darkness. A whisper echoed around him. "You believe fear is just chemicals? Then let us show you what true fear really is." 1,000 eyes opened in the void, gazing into his soul. His mind shattered. His body convulsed, but he did not die. He simply faded. Epilogue: the mansion still stands, waiting for new visitors, new victims. And deep within its walls, 5 new shadows whisper in the darkness, warning, tempting, waiting. Because fear is forever. Ashmore Estates is more than just an abandoned asylum. It is a place where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. A place where the tormented souls of the past still linger, waiting for someone to hear their stories. Would you dare spend a night in Ashmore Estates? Or do you believe some places are best left undisturbed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, stay curious, and stay scared.